podcast is obviously about Crocodile Dundee 3, Crocodile Dundee in Los Angeles, and we felt that we would be remiss if we did not have someone from this movie, and we have the writer of this movie, Matthew Berry, who you know from ESPN. He has a brand new book called Fantasy Life. It is available right now. You can go to fantasylifethebook.com to pick up the book. Please welcome Matthew Berry. How are you, Matthew?
I'm good. I cannot tell you how excited I am to be talking about this movie.
I am blown away, because let's just first get this out. Crocodile Dundee came out in 1986. Crocodile Dundee 3 came out 15 years later. When you were approached with this project, because I imagine this was not a spec script, were you like, were you surprised that this is something that people were interested in? How did you get involved in the Crocodile Dundee franchise 15 years later?
Well, of course. My writing partner and I were busy working on our Gremlins 4 spec when they called up. But yeah, it's interesting. So I was a sitcom writer, and I'd written on a bunch of sitcoms. My writing partner and I, and we'd just gotten off. A sitcom had just been canceled. We were on Union Square, which was another. If you ever do a sitcom version of How Did This Get Made, I'll tell you about Union Square. But so anyway, the show, of course, gets canceled. So our agent calls us. We'd been talking about getting into movies, but we hadn't even written a spec or anything yet. And our agent calls us and he says, "You guys want to get into movies, right?" "Yes." He says, "Well, you know who Paul Hogan is?" "Of course." "You ever seen Crocodile Dundee?" "Of course."
Wait, if you know who Paul Hogan is, you've seen Crocodile Dundee.
Of course.
There is no...
That's true. How else do you know who he is?
Well, I'm a fan of his other work.
Right, sure.
He was in
I haven't seen the
Showa.
Croc movies, but Flipper. I loved him in Flipper. Right, of course.
It was so funny looking at his
commercial.
IMDb page last night. I was like, I almost feel like we could do a whole month on Paul Hogan movies,
my God.
Lightning Jack, where
Let's do
Cuba
it.
Gooding Jr. plays a mute.
What?
Yeah.
Oh, we gotta do that. We should do that and radio.
Oh my God.
Back-to-back Cuba Gooding Jr. movies.
I love that. That's a live show.
But Hogan likes animals, right?
But he can talk to them. He likes them because he can talk to them.
And this is like
anyway.
Yes.
But that's the whole point, right? So he says, he's like, well, I'm one of the agents in charge. Paul Hogan is a client at the agency, wants to do a third installment of the franchise. I'm one of the agents in charge of putting writers in a room to pitch him ideas for the movie. If you want, I'll throw you in a room with him and you can, get some practice. And
Yeah.
my writing partner and I screw it. Let's meet Paul Hogan. That'll be a funny story.
Yeah, of course.
This is sort of a backstory here. Paul Hogan owns like 60% of the movie.
Oh,
Paul Hogan was a TV star. Like he had a variety show in Australia. So he's a TV star, and with a couple of writers from the variety show, he wrote the first one and cobbled together like $5 million from investors to make the first movie. Made on a shoestring budget, and he owned it. So he owned like 60% of it, and then he went around piecemeal to all the different countries and just sold the distribution rights.
Whoa.
So, he made gazillions.
He's a rich dude. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
And now, but it is still 14 years later, though. You're going into pitch. It's a little. Were you a little bit struck by that? Like, why now? Because it's a long gap.
I honestly think he wanted to be a star again, and frankly, I think he wanted his wife to do something.
Oh, right, because he's married to.
Never worked again.
Oh, that's his wife?
Yes.
No.
Yes, that's his wife.
No.
She's a lot younger.
No.
And he had.
No.
Are you okay?
Because, Matthew, the one thing I was going to say is they didn't seem to have 1 ounce of chemistry. Those were the stiffest scenes.
By the way,
I am genuinely shocked.
Not only is this his wife, but he had a very, very public divorce in Australia, like in the tabloids and everything.
With this woman?
Because he cheated on his wife with Linda Kozlowski or whatever her name is. And
No, his other wife with this woman, you mean?
The Linda, the one in the movie, yes. He cheated on
his mistress.
So this is like he went through fire to have this love that could not be contained.
Please tell me that's their real son.
It's weird. In writing the movie, we're jumping all over the place, but just as you talk about it. So there were a couple of times where he had a house in Santa Barbara, and when we would go up and pitch him various things for the movies or go over things with him, we never met her. She was always around, but it was just weird. We would go to this guy's house there were like 2 or 3 days where we spent like the entire day with him, pitching him ideas, and he'd say yes to some stuff and no to some stuff.
I want you to stay out of the picture, sweetheart. Make yourself busy in the kitchen.
Now you know why we asked Eddie Pepitone to be on this podcast. A flawless, known
Well, I
the
was
world
just
over
in
for his
Melbourne, so I have
flawless
the accent.
Paul Hogan impression.
So, I mean, it honestly felt like that. There were the only two rules that we had.
Okay.
The only two, we were told to go pitch, and we were like, it had to take place present day.
Got it.
Which means, we couldn't like go back in time and like do it like, 2 years after the. It
Right.
had to take place present day, and she had to be in it. Everything else was up for grabs.
Okay.
But, so we go in, and we rewatched the first two movies. And you know what we realize is they're very simple movies, obviously. It's just him reacting to stuff. Like, that's the whole movie, right?
Yeah.
And he's funniest when he's reacting to stuff. So we're like, and we don't want this job. We don't think we're getting it. So we basically, the premise we come up with is this, we come up with it in maybe half a day. We're just like, we go in and we say, like, look, you did New York in the first two movies. You've never done L.A. Let's say you're living in Australia, you're still with Linda, but let's say you've never been married, and but you've got a little kid. So he's a little croc.
Right.
Because there was the other thing is, I don't know if you guys remember when this movie came out, but basically like Something About Mary was like the big movie, at least at the time we were pitching it. Something About Mary was like the big movie in Hollywood, and all the things that were getting sold and made were like these raunchy R-rated comedies.
Right.
Really sort of over-the-top Fairly Brother type movies, and we were like, there's no way this movie can compete with that. So the only shot it has is to try to go the other way and just be like super family and friendly and sweet that the people that enjoyed the first one could take their kids to.
Sure.
Was there
so it's
any...
like made for me.
Yes, exactly. We pitch them that simple story of like, hey, you go to L.A. There's some bad guys. You get a job at the studio because you can talk to the animals. Your wife gets a job at Newsday in L.A. You basically you're going to show because your kid's never been to America, so you're going to show him around. It's the blind leading the blind because you're telling him you know America, but obviously you don't. I said it's mostly there's going to be some bad guys at the studio. You save the day, but most of the movie is you walking around L.A.
Which everybody does. Everybody does
Rock.
walks around L.A.
It is funny the amount of times that they drive past and then are back out in front of Hollywood Boulevard. They're always going down Hollywood Boulevard, and it seems like they've driven away, and then they're walking around the corner, and they're at like the Guinness Book of World Records Museum.
Right.
So,
yeah,
yes.
Exactly. Right. I mean.
So you're basically taking the formula.
I think they had 2 days to shoot in L.A. or something like that. So basically, we just said that. We said that's the movie, and then you end with a wedding because everybody loves a wedding.
The L.A. montage was electric, by the way. It made me want to go out on the streets. I just wanted to tell you
Of course.
You couldn't
that was
believe
all
you
Paul.
had
I
it
can't
all
take credit for
available
that.
to you.
So now all three of you are listed as writers. So did he get in the mix and write, or was he just supervising
No,
you
he's
two?
not listed as a writer. That's part of the whole dispute. So anyway,
okay.
so just to put a bow on this. So
Yes.
basically, so we give him that pitch, and it's like that's simple. It's just super simple. Like you go to L.A., blah blah blah. There's bad guys there. You walk around L.A. It's Crocodile Dundee. We'll make it funny.
Yes.
How tough is it? And he's like, oh, you guys are the only ones who get me.
Oh,
we're
my
like,
God.
Awesome.
So it's like the producers.
Are
You're
you
like
kidding
pitching
me?
something.
Yeah.
Like we have no thoughts that we're ever getting this job. We are literally
my
going in
God.
because we think it'll be a funny story to tell. Hey, we met
Right.
we met Paul Hogan, and it was practice to pitch to a movie star or something like that. And apparently everyone else, every other writer he met with, pitched him like Crocodile Dundee saves the universe from a nuclear explosion, Croc 3 in space, like all these like crazy terrible ideas. And we were the only
Wait,
ones
so
that
you're
said,
saying
like,
Croc
we'll
3
put
in
you in
space is
situations and you
terrible?
react to them.
I do want to see Croc 3 in space, by the way.
By the way, that would be great.
Croc
I will
4.
pay you $500 to write that.
That would be the sequel to Sharknado.
That would be amazing.
All right, so then now you're trapped. You're in.
Yeah, well, I mean, they basically, so he wants to, it becomes one of these things where he wants to co-write it with us, and so because Paul's writing quote is so insanely high, people don't realize
Academy
that Paul Hogan
Award
got an Academy Award nomination
Yes.
for writing for the first
What?
movie.
Paul Hogan got an
He got
Academy
an
Award.
Academy for writing the
Crocodile Dundee won?
Yep.
Yep. It did not win, but he
was
was
nominated.
him and the two other guys that wrote the first movie, and I don't know who contributed what to that, but
June loved
Paul
it.
Hogan
Well, I
is
mean,
an
I did
Academy
like it,
Award
but-
nominee
Yes.
for the screenplay of
You
Croc
are
3, of
blowing
Crocodile
my
Dundee, the original.
mind.
And a Golden Globe winner for Best Actor.
That's
There you go.
mind-boggling.
Yeah.
And a Razzie nominee for Crocodile Dundee in Los Angeles, along with me. Thank you very much.
Nice.
we got screwed. I thought we should have won. So anyway, but because Paul's writing quote was so high, what Paramount was going to pay us to do this movie was insane amount of money for first-time movie writers.
Yeah.
So we were like,
You must have been happy about that.
Yeah.
well, exactly. Like if you're going to sell out big.
Yeah.
All the kids out there.
But at that point, I mean, you've got those Union Square dollars.
The sweet,
7
sweet
episodes
square
or
dollars.
whatever. Yeah, so I mean, listen, so we did it, and Alyssa bought me a house. God bless Croc. for
Sure.
that.
So now you're signed up. You got a lot of money. You are you're off to do this movie. So now, what is this process like as you embark on the action? Yeah.
Right. So the plan was for us to, quote, write it together. But the last thing my writing partner and I want to do is sit in front of a computer screen with Paul Hogan for 3 months, right? And we know he doesn't want to do that either.
Mm-hmm.
So we say to him, look, let us write the first draft. We'll run everything by you and everything like that. We'll write the first draft, and then we'll hand it to you, and you can take your pass at it, and we'll go from there. So we go off and we write our script, and we pitch him a bunch of stuff, and some stuff he likes and some stuff he doesn't, and he gave us notes and whatever. And
Give me an example. Do you remember like something that he liked, something he didn't like? Do you remember anything that you're like, oh, I wish we would have gotten that in, like that? Do you remember anything like that?
I mean, yes. I mean, here's one thing that we pitched that he didn't like that I thought would be funny, that I thought was a very kind of Crocodile Dundee type thing.
Right.
I mean, remember, it's all sort of gentle humor, right?
Sure.
It's all sort of observational, gentle humor that he's reacting. He's a guy from the Outback, but like how like when you're in L.A., everyone valets.
Right.
You go no matter where you valet, you can't just find any parking. And when you get a valet ticket, it says read this. And it's all the disclaimer stuff on the ticket.
That's funny, yeah.
So we thought it would be funny if Paul Hogan actually reads it. But like
Yeah.
there's a long line of cars and everything like that, and he gets there. Of course, everyone just takes the ticket and walks off, and they go. But it literally says read this, it limits your liability, and so he won't give the keys until he's read the whole thing, and he's considering it. And people are honking, and everyone's going nuts, and he's just, hold on, I'm thinking about this, and so it was just, it was the whole thing that he just doesn't understand.
A funny piece.
No, I think he was right to deny that.
There is still a valet joke in this. There is
the valet joke where he
in this.
attacks the valet, yeah.
Right, and that's what it turned into.
Sometimes we were talking about this. Sometimes Croc is violent. Sometimes he's very much a pacifist, and sometimes he's very much aware of things, and sometimes he's very much unaware of things. Like, did he have rules for the Croc character? Like, because he goes to punch that valet real quick, but then you see that he seems like he's a pacifist most of the time.
There were no rules. I think it was just whatever worked for Paul.
All right.
He would say sometimes like, I wouldn't do that.
Got it.
But he never seemed to really say like, oh, Crocodile Dundee does A, but he doesn't do B. He never sat down.
Right.
It was all sort of in his mind.
He didn't have the Crocodile Dundee Bible that he passed off.
No, we didn't get that. We didn't get the secret handshake.
He wasn't that detailed.
So you write the first draft, and then what happens here?
So we write the first draft based on his notes, everything like that, and so basically he then rewrites pretty much the entire script. He throws a couple of new things in there, but generally, and this is the example I give. So let's say we're doing a scene like we wrote a scene like sort of like interior podcast studio.
Right.
Matthew's talking to Paul Scheer. Matthew Berry is talking to Paul Scheer about his movie. Okay?
Yes.
Paul, Matthew, welcome to the show. And he would rewrite that
This
to say,
movie
like,
is
interior
amazing.
TV studio. Nick Kroll is interviewing Eric Abrams.
Oh, wow. So he was just going through and just changing names so he can get so he was trying to steal writer's credit from you, essentially.
Correct. I mean, so there's not one word that's the same. So, like, interior
but the
TV
intention
studio,
is
two
all the
different
same.
guys, and they're talking about his book. And so it's like a college kid, changing his term paper, from Wikipedia or something.
Oh man, that's really that's like really.
So he
low
could
blow.
justify his writing it, huh?
Right, exactly, and just everything was just sort of like a worse version of what we had.